The Boogeyman got off to a really, really great start. I thought it was going to be a fantastic film, and it felt like it could have some really deep meanings. But honestly, the more it went on, the less good it became, to be quite frank. I kind of do recommend it, so I'm not going to spoil anything. I think it's worth checking out to form your own opinions because there are definitely some good bits in it. But as a whole, it kind of just disappointed. This was released this year, 2023, directed by Rob Savage, and stars Sophie Thatcher as Sadie, Vivien Lyra Blair as Sawyer, and Chris Messina as Will. And they're a family who are grieving the loss of the mother and the wife, and that in itself is very emotional. And on top of that, there seems to be a dark presence around their home, and the whole mystery is, what is this presence, this so-called boogeyman? And there is one scene that I want to praise for being so effectively done, and it's the scene where they're putting Sawyer through exposure therapy to try and quell her fear of the dark. And there's just something about it, because I think it's something we could all find ourselves in, that sense of exposure therapy where we're being forced to face our fears, and it's just done so well. It's a brief scene, and honestly probably not one of the most important scenes, but there was just something about it that I thought was brilliant, and Vivien Lyra Blair's performance there was exactly what I would have expected. That's exactly how I think somebody would respond. That's how I think I'd respond in that situation. The immediate cowering into the nearest, well, other person, happens to be her sister. I just, beautifully done. And from that point on, honestly, I feel like it kind of went downhill. And it wasn't instant. It's not like it went from being quite compelling to being rather dull. It just seemed as it went on to become less scary, less suspenseful, almost the more we learned, and I guess the more we were exposed to, the less interesting it became, the less mysterious, the less scary, and I just lost interest. I managed to watch it all. It's not like I couldn't watch it. It's not boring completely, but it didn't manage to sustain that quality, that suspense, that uncertainty that it had at the beginning. And sure, when you learn more about things, it is less uncertain, but with a good horror film, they managed to find fear in other angles, whether that's an increase in jump scares or the use of sound or anything else to evoke fear, and it just didn't do a very good job of it at all. I also have to say, I don't really like Sadie as a character. Sometimes she was okay, but sometimes she just bothered me, so I didn't like the fact that a lot of this was seen through her perspective, because I didn't really like her as a character. As I said, it seemed like it could have had this deeper meaning. They've just lost their mother. Could this boogeyman be a manifestation of that? But actually, there are other things going on as well. So it wasn't the deep, moving, scary horror story that I was looking for. And unfortunately, I was ultimately just left feeling kind of deflated. I started off really enthusiastic about it, thinking, it set the tone really well. And if it had been consistent with that, or even if it managed to regain that a little bit, it would have been pretty good. But honestly, it started off great, and it was just kind of a slippery slope. After I'd say about half an hour, I didn't time it exactly, but roughly about a third of the film, really solid, and then it just became progressively, well, I don't want to say progressively worse, but certainly progressively less good. But would I recommend it? Yeah, sure, give it a go. If you're a horror fan, you might like it. There might be things that appeal to you. It's a relatively well-written story. I think they could have done a lot more with it, but it still wasn't a bad narrative, but it wasn't scary. So it depends on what you're looking for. For me personally, The Boogeyman was kind of disappointing, but I don't necessarily regret the time I spent watching it. I wanted to see it. I watched it. It didn't live up to my expectations, or indeed the expectations that the film itself set up in the beginning. But it just didn't work for me. I should also point out this is apparently based on the short story by Stephen King. I have seen this advertised where they're leaning very heavily on the Stephen King aspect. But honestly, I read the description of the short story on Wikipedia. To be honest, I probably could have just read the short story. I'm not sure how short it is. but it does sound, the short story sounds a lot better than the film, and I might read it at some point. But I suppose I couldn't finish this discussion without mentioning the fact that it is based on a short story by Stephen King, but I can't really blame that short story for the problems with the narrative because it does seem quite a lot different. Again, just based on the information on Wikipedia. I can't say 100% certain because I haven't read it, but I don't know. The Wikipedia entry makes it seem a lot darker and a lot deeper as well. So I'm pleased I didn't read the description before watching it because I think my expectations would have been significantly higher. So I'm pleased I've done it the other way on. Might check out the short story. I'd recommend checking out the film if it sounds like it would appeal to you. I don't regret having seen it, but I most certainly won't be watching it again.